The issue is that all lives matter types don't really have an issue. They're just counter-protesting Black Lives Matter. If the all lives matter thing was a legitimate effort to try to de-racialize a broader class issue, I think that it would have turned out very differently. But we have to be clear, that's not what it was being used for. It was being used to say, like, oh, you say Black Lives Matter. Well, you're implicitly suggesting mine doesn't, so all lives matter.
I think people are going to have a different attitude about this with all this defund the police talk. I really do. And the looting and and not only that, but here in Santa Monica, they have police, right?
Yeah.
The police are there, and they were told to stand down. They were told to stand there while people
But I can
were
tell
looting.
you, even if that wasn't the case, though, even if I were to accept your premise, back in the civil rights protests, the original ones, you know, there was a slogan that was used pretty frequently amongst the black folk marching. It was, "Am I not a man? You know, am I not a person?" And to me, when we're saying like, well, Black Lives Matter, you're leaving out the white people who are poor. This sounds to me like if a woman of that era was to walk up to a man with that sandwich board over his chest and say, well, I'm not a man. What about me? I recognize that the language can seem exclusionary, but if you pull back, you recognize the Black Lives Matter movement is not exclusionary. Even if the language may suggest some sort of exclusionary focus on black people, the people marching out there and the policies proposed by BLM advocates are generally very, very progressive when it comes to class-based issues and class-based solutions. And they also protest white folk getting killed by the police or black folk getting killed by black police.
It's not going to end well. The way to handle this, in my opinion, is to fix the current structure, to do it in a logical way that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's not to take everything down. So to take this back to what you were saying about Black Lives Matter, don't you think there's probably people in Black Lives Matter who don't have these sort of Marxist ideas?
Yes, the All Lives Matter thing was not made up by poor white people who are trying to get that solidarity. It was made up mostly by Republican counter-protest. Like the All Lives Matter thing was never made in a good faith effort to try to broaden the net.
I think there's a bunch of things happening at the same time, and I think when it comes to the rioting and looting, I think there's a lot of just opportunists.
Even if we were to believe there was an exclusionary element here outside of the mere language of the movement, there are racialized elements of this disparity that can't be solved just with class solutions. It's like if 100 years ago you put all the black folk in Section A and all the white folk in Section B, and then 100 years later you're like, oh, well, I'm really sorry about that. So anyway, people in Section A make half as much as people in Section B. I'm sorry, that's the law. No race mentioned, just what neighborhood are you born in?
They also don't have hospitals, right? Like, what are you going to do if someone does get shot?
And the breadlining and the distribution of wealth has reflected a distinct racialized oppression in this country that I think we can solve with race-neutral policies, but we must acknowledge that it exists.
The people that are involved, that are doing all the groundwork, probably aren't even aware of.
No.
I don't think they're necessarily that organized.
Yeah, but when we're talking about like what BLM wants, I don't mean like these little events or soirees which may have like these weird elements that are kind of like misappropriated woke culture. What I mean is like broadly, how are we fixing this multi-trillion-dollar economic gap that we have? Yeah. And when it comes to the California thing, I'm mixed on this.
You have to take into consideration these kids haven't worked in 3 months.
Yeah.
They're probably broke as fuck and looking for free shit.
Yep.
There's a ton of them. And there's just opportunists, man. You saw that in New York, for sure. The crazy thing about New York is a lot of it was apartment buildings filming down on the streets because, you know, in New York, everyone's in
high-rises.
Yeah. So they're filming. There's so many videos of people filming on the streets while all this madness is going. There's one crazy video where all these people are breaking into shit and this guy runs in the street and another guy hits him with a car and he goes flying through the air and the car takes off. Jesus. Bro, it's mad. And then they're just smashing through Soho and breaking into art galleries and stealing everything and like it's nuts, man.
But the reason they're doing that is because the language of their law prevents them from implementing affirmative action the same way other states in this country do. It's just optically, it looks terrible. Like, wow, you know, you've gone so woke that they're getting rid of civil rights, and it looks terrible, and I recognize that.